I think the idea for Fatalities just came from the desire to rub it in someone's face, to just finish that person.
We always liked the idea of letting the player, get a free hit on somebody.
The fatality plays an importance because it's a way to really put like an exclamation point on the end of a fight.
It's a sort of an arcade mentality, when everybody's competing against each other, and everybody's watching, you want to be able to just jab that guy, a little bit more.
And if you were able to do a fatality, it was something that made you cool. How did you do it? And you can kind of either keep it a secret or, share the information.
It was a major enticement. I think as time went on, it became an expected part of a Mortal Kombat game that you couldn't conceivably put out a Mortal Kombat game without having fatalities in it.
Some of the ideas for fatalities in Mortal Kombat 1 came from pop culture, from some movies that we had seen, comic books or whatever, just, things that really struck us as being violent.
For Mortal Kombat 1, probably my favorite fatality was the one that was the most controversial, which is the spine rip from Sub-Zero. That was the one that usually got the most attention, the most oohs and ahs in the arcades.
We wanted to do a sort of a fatality, sort of a move, but that wasn't really a fatality.
When we came up with the idea of the pit and knocking somebody down into the spikes below, we really wanted to make sure that we had a fatality in the game that anybody could do.
It actually wasn't played up like a regular fatality because it didn't have the whole choreography. It was just all of a sudden you were punched off the bridge and you fell and died.
With Mortal Kombat 2, we wanted to do everything bigger and better. And with that game, we realized that fatalities had such a big impact into people's reaction to the game. With Mortal Kombat 1, it was something that we threw in there. We said, okay, maybe people are going to like it. Let's see. With Mortal Kombat 2, we knew that was a showcase feature for these games.
We added a second fatality to give the game some legs. I mean, there wasn't just one fatality you had to learn. Now you had to learn two.
I think it was all about being, bigger and badder and better.
And we really wanted to kind of push the envelope again, kind of do something that was very, over the top in terms of just the shock value.
Flawless victory.
My favorite fatality from MK2 was Kitana's kiss and inflate fatality. We really started, introducing levels of humor into the game. It wasn't so dark, and so when Kitana kissed the guy and then he inflated and then exploded, it was outrageous, it was violent, but at the same time there was humor in it. I liked always kind of combining the two. It's kind of like, dark comedy.
My most memorable fatality from Mortal Kombat 2 would probably be Liu Kang turning into the dragon and biting the guy. I worked on that particular one, and it kind of stands out because it's so big. The dragon, you don't expect, a character. He's the only character that turns into anything, I think, in Mortal Kombat 2.
I think Kung Lao's, because Kung Lao has always been one of my favorite characters. He kind of has this Clint Eastwood, the brow thing going on, and the blade on the hat, and it's gruesome. Is the taking the hat and split down the middle, and the body does the whole.
I guess I remember the Scorpion one where he demasks and then you see his skull and then he burns you up with flames out of his mouth.
This is the only remaining artifact of the infamous plastic skeleton model. Basically, so we have to take a model like this, the skeleton arm, and we move it up and put like a piece of clay in here. Take a picture, move it up, put a piece of clay, take a picture, and do this. So it's essentially you'd have this motion. So all of a sudden, then we put that in the computer, and that would go ahead and like paint fire on it. If you ever were caught on fire, this is the natural motion you would probably do.
Flawless victory.
We had to add more stage fatalities to Mortal Kombat 2 to up, the ante on, for Mortal Kombat 1.
The pit was a huge success in Mortal Kombat 1, so we wanted to kind of come up with like a pseudo 3D version of it. We had a pit, you knock the guy down the pit, but this time the camera angle was from the top.
And the guy is falling, so he's stationary, but the background scales up, so it looks like it's getting closer. So that was really, it was cool. So the guy would go and smack, hit the ground.
I think the idea of friendships came from the reaction to all the attention that Mortal Kombat 1 was getting with its fatalities. And so it was kind of like our way of making fun of that, all the attention that that game got because of the fatalities.
And so the thought was, well, we can be nice too and put in these friendships instead. So instead of ripping someone's heart out, you can give them a cake.
My favorite friendship move is probably Liu Kang's disco dance one. That's probably the silliest one. It's just so completely out of character.
The friendship that sticks out in my mind is the one where Jax has the paper dolls and stretches them out. That's pretty funny.
Finish him.
My recollection of Fatalities is I remember Dan Forden, who's the audio guy. He came up to me and he said, hey, how about we do something called a Fatality where you turn your opponent into a baby.
And I'm not sure what that was about, but I think it was from searching through sound effect CDs for stuff for the game, and I came across some babies crying or something. And I don't know, it just sort of popped in my head. It's like, well, what if you turned them into a baby and then they would cry or something?
And I was like, why would you do that? And he was just like, no, I just think it'd be funny. And that was pretty much good enough for me. So, all it required was for us to make, 12 little baby images.
One of the improvements to Mortal Kombat 3 over Mortal Kombat 2 was the addition of using 3D graphics to come up with some of the backgrounds.
A lot of the effects, from little blood explosions, they weren't so much done by hand anymore. They're actually done in 3D.
MK3, we took the same approach to making that game as we did with Mortal Kombat 2, where basically it's more, bigger, better.
Some of my favorites from MK3 are probably Sindel's when she screams your skin off. She's a very loud voice.
Reptile, where he kind of pukes acid on the opponent and you see him the acid eat away at the other guy.
Sector had one of my favorite fatalities in Mortal Kombat 3. His chest doors would open up, this huge mechanical device would open up, squish him, go right back into his chest. I thought it was funny because there was no way that size of a squisher could come out of his chest, but yet it did.
Also, there was one where Jax kind of grew into this giant and then he kind of stepped on the other guy. Again, that was a little bit more towards the humorous side, but it was something kind of outrageous nonetheless.
Liu Kang wins.
Animalities, I believe, were created by the fans. They wanted to see different modes. They wanted to see nudalities, which of course we couldn't do.
And one of the rumors that wasn't true was this feature called an animality.
That someone put out there, oh, you can turn Scorpion into an animal, and which wasn't true. But then we decided to make it true in MK3.
The reason some of these alities weren't done past Mortal Kombat 3 is because it's difficult to get things to transform in a 3D environment. I mean, I suppose you could do it with a puff of smoke that covers the change, but to morph, one completely different model into another completely different model, is a little difficult to do.
It was definitely different doing fatalities in MK4 as opposed to the previous games because everything was in 3D.
Definitely, I think the biggest thing was the ability to sever limbs, and we were never able to really do that before. And so, when you were able to blow people up and just tear them literally limb from limb, that opened up a lot of creative input for more things that we could do.
Now we can move the camera around. We did a lot of funny, maybe 3 camera cuts of the same, explosion or something like that. Big thing is we'll have the body blow up, and have the camera cut around it. Then the last camera cut, you see the head rotating and hit the camera and fall.
Well, the biggest limitation on the animation in the 2D games was that every frame of animation was an entire separate image. So it was very memory intensive to have smooth animation. So with motion capture, we have this full fluid motion that wasn't available in a 2D game.
Animation-wise, it actually becomes a little bit easier because you only have to capture the motion once and then you apply it to a 3D model, as opposed to having every single character in the digitized world. You'd have to have every single character act out, having every fatality done to them.
One of my favorite fatalities in MK4 was Reptiles. The one specifically where he actually jumps up on the victim and just starts gnawing at him. And he gets up, he pushes the victim down, the camera zooms up on the character's face and you just see a mutilated face. It was just really, really gruesome and really effective.
Next would probably be the Shinnok one, where his hand, that skeleton hand, would come up and drag you into hell. That was kind of cool too.
I came in at the very end on doing fatalities. I did Reiko, so that's the one I remember the best. Not that it was a very spectacular fatality, but it was the very first Mortal Kombat fatality I ever programmed.
I think the advantage for not having to deal with the arcade was that we had a fixed platform. I mean, granted, the console systems vary, but not having to worry about the real big differences between graphic chips and things that the arcade systems have versus the consoles.
The time that it takes to go from raw data to finished product is much shorter. You get to spend a lot more effort on the creativity side of it.
We just about tripled our polygon count. We expanded our texture size tremendously. We expanded motion and a lot of the effects we could do. So it opened up a lot of doors to do wild fatalities.
So with Deadly Alliance, suddenly we knew we were in the home. We didn't have to ask for 50 cents every 2 minutes. So we can really stage our fatalities and make them these big events. And that's why they started becoming a lot more elaborate.
My favorite fatality in Deadly Alliance has to be the Sub-Zero pulling the whole skeleton out of his victim. That was the first fatality programming that I got to do, and it was a lot of fun putting in the effects, the blood, the bones.
One of my favorites was Cyrax's, where he had this hydraulic arm that came out and grabbed the victim and just like slammed him up and down until he was a bloody pulp. That was good times.
I think my favorite fatality from Deadly Alliance was Kung Lao's. It was, there was a little bit of humor, but it was also kind of flashy, stylish. You know, he threw his hat, it stuck into the guy's head, and he fell down. And then he would kind of stomp on the opponent, and the head would fly up, and he would catch it and do this kind of fancy pose, which was, silly in some ways, fancy and stylish in other ways, but it was probably one of the more elaborate fatalities from Deadly Alliance.
For MK Deadly Alliance, we scaled back to only one fatality per character, basically due to time factors. We didn't have time to do 2 for every character.
It just got to the point where at the end of the game we just couldn't get all the content in. So we ended up deciding on 1 fatality per character, and that's how it ended up.
Part of the reason we decided to go with 2 fatalities in Deception is we'd heard pretty clear from a lot of the fans that they wanted more. They really loved the fatalities in Deadly Alliance, and they wanted us to expand and keep adding, so we decided to go for 2 with each character.
Kira, one of the new characters, she just kind of does like, she throws her knives at the victim's feet, the guy gets stuck, and then she kind of does a little walk and then just rips the body in half and throws it off. Working with like the animators, especially Carlos, who does the animation, it was kind of funny seeing like how he would be the guy who's doing the walking for the female character.
One of the most disturbing fatalities is the Melina one. And then when she's done, she does this sexy sort of, ooh, that was awesome. And what the fans don't know is that was Carlos.
Baracho takes a swig of some wine, and then he takes a torch and lights the guy on fire. And then the other one is him basically, expelling gas or farting, and then using the same torch, and having the gas like ignite and then burn up the character.
The reason we added the harikiri was to give the other opponent a chance, just a little bit of a window to kind of turn the tables on the other guy that was performing the fatality.
We thought it would be cool to make the fatality part of the game like a race. So it's basically who can do a fatality first.
Probably one of my favorite harikiris is Ermax. It's just so gruesome. He gets down on his knees and basically just starts ramming his head into the floor.
I think Kenshi, because it's the classical, samurai harikiri one. And then Nightwolf throwing up the axe, impaled.
Death traps are something that we've always wanted to have in the game ever since the beginnings. The whole idea is that while you're fighting, there's a chance that even if you're losing, you could have just 1 or 2 pixels of life left. You still have a chance to win the match. And so you're trying to maneuver your victim into the danger zone. It adds a lot of extra strategy to the game.
My favorite death trap in Deception was definitely the grinder. When you knocked your opponent in there, there'd be these 2 huge grinders that would pin the victim, and it would be bad enough that if the victim just went right through it, but instead the victim is trapped in there, and there's this little bit of tension where you feel his bones crushing almost. And then eventually he gets sucked through and blood is projected onto the wall behind him.
My favorite death trap in Deception is the Hell's Foundry Smasher. The character gets kicked into a wall, lands on a hot slab of metal. His skin, his shoes, and clothes should be on fire now, but yet he's trying to get back to safety on this hot metal, and wham!
Shujinko wins.
The idea behind the creative fatality system is to really expand the fatality. Instead of just doing a really complicated button combo and sitting back and watching everything happen, we wanted to put more options in the player's hands, let them show creativity by able to string different attacks.
Every time you perform one, you have a little less time to perform the second one. So a really good player is going to get 2 or 3 part fatalities in there. And a great player is going to get like a 7 or 8 part fatality in there, and an amazing player is going to get, a 9 or 10 part fatality in there. So it actually is a gameplay feature. We award currency in the game for it. So it's not only is it a great show, but it's actually a skill that you have to learn.
We spent a lot of time thinking about the death traps in Armageddon. They're much more elaborate than the ones we've seen in Deception.
My favorite stage fatality has got to be the classic falling through a floor and landing on spikes. And in Armageddon, we've updated it in the bell tower arena. We have a 4-pronged spike. When someone lands on it, each limb gets severed. We even have a rat that comes in and grabs one of the arms and num-nums away with it.
It's hard to pick my favorite death trap in Armageddon. There's a lot of good ones.
The subway fatality, because it's a remake in 3D of a fatality that we had in Mortal Kombat 3, and it's a lot more of a cinematic presentation, looks a lot more painful, and people remember it, but they don't remember seeing it how we're presenting it.
Probably my favorite one right now is in the Wastelands.
It's cool. It's a cool visual. A guy getting thrown into the catapult with the burning balls, and all of a sudden, he gets flung. So he's flying through the air on fire. Then he hits the wall, and he slides down. So I like that. It worked out pretty well. I was happy with that.
I think my all-time favorite, as classic as it is, would be the Sub-Zero spine rip, that one.
That's kind of the signature one that everybody thinks of, that's always mentioned. And it's just kind of like the ultimate fatality for everybody.
My favorite fatality is ripping someone's heart out, and I think that defines what Mortal Kombat's all about.
Probably it would have to be the one of the stage fatalities. I think the collapsing cliffs one, with the detail of struggling with this spike through your stomach. I think that was really great.
When I first played Mortal Kombat in the arcade, I thought when Scorpion took off his ninja hood and blew his fire at the victim, and to see him like burn up in smoke, I thought that was like the coolest thing I ever saw, and it just was like a pretty good shock when I first saw that, and to this day it sticks with me.
I would have to go with a classic, and I'm gonna say it's Sub-Zero Spine Rip from MK Deadly Alliance. Something about the choreography of the whole thing is a lot more elaborate than the previous Spine Rips he did.
My all-time favorite fatality is probably with Quan Chi in Mortal Kombat 4, where he tears the opponent's leg off and kind of beats him to death with it.
Probably my least favorite fatalities are the ones that just receive the least polish, so that they don't look as convincing as they should.
My least favorite fatality for Mortal Kombat was in MK3, where he just started launching all these bombs out of his chest. The screen faded and you saw the Earth, and the Earth explodes, and that's it. That's the fatality. It was one of the quicker ones, I'm sure, that we did, and it was easily my least favorite fatality.
Boy, my least favorite one has got to be Scorpion's animality. Of all animals to change into, Scorpion changes into a penguin and lays an exploding egg.
My least favorite fatality coincidentally also involves Quan Chi, and it is his neck stretch fatality from Deadly Alliance.
Yeah, that one probably could have been given to someone else or been left on the drawing board probably.
It was kind of done in a rush. He jumps up on the victim, grabs him by the head, and just pulls him, and his neck stretches super long. It looks pretty silly.
This guy walking around with the exaggerated neck, it makes me laugh. I know it's silly, but I think it's funny.
I'm not sure. I think we were getting a little low on creativity there.
That thing totally didn't make sense.
It was a funny idea, and we were going to do it, but once we saw it in the game, I personally said, it looks kind of dumb. But we left it in because we were running out of time. You know, sorry about that.
So Quan Chi has my favorite and least favorite fatalities in all of the Mortal Kombat series.
Deadly. Killer. Bloody. Mortal. Brutal. Evil. Vicious. Savage. Ultimate. Sub-Zero wins. Extreme fatality.